I see God in everyone. God, I feel you all around me. Oh, how you astound me with your grace. One of the things that I know is absolutely true is that in what we teach in Science of Mind and in Centers for Spiritual Living worldwide, including CSLDallas, when you come into this experience, and when we share this experience together, we have that opportunity to see God in ourselves, to recognize it, and to see it in each other. So it's no surprise that with our theme for the month being igniting the power of freedom, that we spend some time recognizing that freedom comes from within. And as we are learning that together and honoring that truth and celebrating it together, we recognize our purpose as a community. Now, you read it or recited it earlier, right? That we are radically inclusive, that we are spiritually progressive, and we are all about transforming lives. So there's no way to actually live in a way that reflects your freedom if you don't understand your purpose. So last week, Reverend Karen talked about that part of our organizational purpose, our center's purpose, that is about being radically inclusive. And today I get to expand that into how it shows up and how the fact that we are spiritually progressive not only is our purpose, but it is our way of being. Now, I don't know about you, but I've been to a lot of different churches. I've been to and participated in faith practices from many, 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 many different religions along the way. And part of what shows me what that church or that community or that practice is all about is the music. So just today, were you reminded that one of the ways you know that CSLDallas is a place that is spiritually progressive is based on the music? Yeah, it's really interesting. So Karen mentioned that our drummer has been on, in Drummer magazine and is a drummer, the favorite drummer of one of the internationally renowned metal bands in the world. Our bassist, who plays a dozen or 20 instruments, right, is one of the most requested jazz musicians in Dallas and North Texas, right? We have birthed songwriters and singers and vocalists from this platform who have written and created new thought, spiritual chants, and songs that are used by spiritual communities throughout the world. We have music that I recognize as helping us to be spiritually progressive. Because if you come for 4 Sundays in a row, you're going to hear some gospel, you're going to hear something from a Broadway show, you're going to hear some country western, some meditative chants, you're going to hear it all. Just come 4 or 5 weeks. If you didn't like the music today, come next week. Okay, it'll be different, right? Right? And for me, that's one of the ways that we're spiritually progressive, because we understand that the music is simply a way to connect with the spiritual truth of God, of life itself, and that it takes lots of different kinds of music. It is not just about trying to please Linda, and then next week trying to please Jimmy, and next week trying to please Cleo, even though we are radically inclusive and we want to do that, it is also about having a different experience of spirituality that allows you to be where you are and to grow. So I'll tell you a story about not the very first time. I've been visiting CSLDallas, First Church of Religious Science, for more than a decade, but I never considered myself a member, and I never considered it my spiritual home until this shift began occurring because I attended an opening celebration for the Season of Peace and Nonviolence. And during that service, that ritual, that ceremony, there was spoken word, like rap, poetry, spoken word. There was a Buddhist monk who gave part of this celebration and guided us through meditation. There was prayer in 3 different forms, and there was the music that I think, as I recall, there were 6 different songs sung during that service, and every one of them represented a different genre, a different feel. And I remember that day I was sitting right over here, and I got up at the end of that service kind of in a daze, like, what is it that I just experienced? It wasn't any one thing that someone said. It wasn't any one song. It wasn't any one anything. It was all about this feeling that I had that the cells in my body had somehow been reconfigured in that hour or hour and 15 minutes, and I was going out the door a different person than the Tracy who walked in the door. Now, I know none of you have ever experienced that, right? And I was like, this is a different place. This is not the church I grew up in. This is not the church that my parents raised me in. This is not the church that I went to 3 weeks ago visiting, and this is not even the church that First Church of Religious Science, or now CSLDallas, it's not the same church that it had been 3 years or 5 years earlier. And that was such a shift for me that it is, for me, one of the things I remember almost every time we say spiritually progressive, that we are committed to exploring and experiencing, teaching all of the different ways that spirit can express, all the different ways that spirit courts us into a love affair with it. I want to live my life knowing that and showing that I love that which created me and I am an example of it. And it is in this spiritually progressive environment where I get invited to remember that over and over and over and over again. So our primary textbook, our primary guidebook is The Science of Mind, written by Ernest Holmes. And if you look at the cover, Ernest Holmes was very clear. Ernest Holmes says the science of mind is a faith, it is a philosophy, and it is a way of life. A faith, a philosophy, a way of life. We teach that what makes us spiritually progressive is that we teach there is only one God. And that God is alive in me. In you, and you, and you, and you, and you, and you, right? That God is alive in me. And God is experienced by all paths. So you can't do life wrong. You can take a path, and then as you learn more and as you align yourself more with the divine that created you, you can turn this way and walk for a while. And if that's not working for you, or you get a better idea, you can turn this way and you can keep walking. But you are never off of your path of experiencing life with God. And while that's true for me, it's true for everyone, is always walking their path. So all paths lead to God. And life is controlled by spiritual laws that are as clear and as consistent as the physical laws that we think of, like gravity. We think of that as a physical law, but there are spiritual laws that are exactly that consistent and that replicable, because they work the same for every person, whether you are aware that you are using that law or not. We're spiritually progressive because we teach that each one of us has been born as an original blessing, that there is no such thing as original sin, and the best you can be is a sinner. We teach that you are born as an original blessing, and you are constantly learning how to live into and expand or express that blessing. That there is no duality. There is only God. There's only good. Everything is good or leading to good. It may not feel so good right now, but it's not because there's a demon or Satan or somebody who's just making you a victim. It's a path, a step on your path that is leading to the ultimate good. And that each one of us has free will. Right, that humanity was created with free will. So I get to choose how I interpret the things that are happening in my life, and I get to choose what I do next. I don't get to choose everything that happens to me. I don't get to choose everything that happens in the world, but I have complete free will to choose how I engage with it. These are the things that in my mind show to me that we are spiritually progressive, that we have lessons that we teach that are different than you will find in many other places. And it is what gives us the ability to be who we are as CSLDallas and who we are as spiritual beings in the world. And when Ernest Holmes wrote The Science of Mind, he created around that, he wrote Creative Mind, the book, and then he wrote Science of Mind, and then he went on, now there's 25, 30 books and other collections of things that he wrote. And so he created the Institute of Religious Science. We are spiritually progressive because we actually did not start out trying to be a church. We started out from our infancy as being a teaching order. We started out being completely, totally committed to education, spiritual education, and how to apply that in your life. And the result is we are spiritually progressive because we have very little dogma and very little you must do it exactly this way or you are not a good blank, because it's about our education. Ernest Holmes said that anyone who is serious about science of mind will teach it and practice it. And so often some of you have heard me or other practitioners or ministers just kind of almost a mantra: teach and practice, practice and teach. Teach and practice, practice and teach. Teach and practice, practice and teach. Say it with me. Teach and practice, practice and teach. Because it's not something that you read the Science of Mind textbook and now you got it. You don't got to do anything else anymore. Right, because we're living our lives every day. Things come up. We're in conversations with people. We have things that we have to do. And what helps us get through those things is that we are practicing what we have learned about spirituality and spiritual truth and what are the spiritual laws. Or everything is going really great and we find ourselves teaching others how, maybe sometimes just by our example, but teaching others how to use and apply these spiritual laws. So our founder, Ernest Holmes, was very, very clear. We are a teaching order, and it really does shift how we show up being spiritually progressive. So let me demonstrate that in a different way. If you are able to, I'm gonna ask a few questions, and if you are able to, I'm gonna invite you to stand up if your answer is yes, okay? So, how many people who are here today have taken the Science of Mind Foundations class? Oh my goodness, look around. Wow, okay, you can sit down. There's gonna be a few of these, so this is your mid-service exercise, okay? Okay, how many people have taken spiritual practices, the class? These are all classes, okay? How many people have taken the mind-body connection? How many people have taken Thomas Troward, either of the Troward classes? How many people have taken Essential Ernest Holmes? How many people have taken Inward Journey? Would you just stand up, right? You don't have to sit down. How many people in this class, in this group today, have taken Emma Curtis Hopkins? Okay. How many people have taken any other Science of Mind class that I haven't mentioned? Okay, you can sit, thank you. Because see, I have this theory that the reason that we can say that we are spiritually progressive is because we are very clear. You cannot learn Science of Mind and apply it in your life only by coming to church on Sunday. And we are a teaching order. And so the practicing requires us to learn more so that we can practice it. Does that make any sense at all to you? Yeah. And for me, the service, the SPAN service, Season for Peace and Nonviolence opening service, was a shift. The day I knew I was all in, I came here for a graduation. We were graduating, honoring, not yet installing, but honoring a number of people who were becoming licensed practitioners. That means they had taken over 400 hours of classes and had been also trained to do spiritually based coaching, prayer for others, and to lead within the community as part of the ecclesiastical team. At that service and ceremony, Dr. Petra had certificates for everyone who had taken a certificated Science of Mind class in the previous 10 months. I was sitting 3/4 of the way in the back, in the middle, and she started calling out classes. If you took Foundations class, as I just did, come up and get your certificate. And there was a healthy line of people who went through and got their certificates. And I was like, oh, isn't that cute? Yeah, they took a class. And then she called out spiritual practices. And more people, some of those same people and more people got up, came down, went through the line, got their certificate. It's like, it's a lot of the same people, but there are other people. Class after class after class, and probably 9 classes or 10 maybe at the most. And then what I noticed was that there were at least 20 people who had taken 3 or 4 or more classes. And I said, oh, that's why it feels different. When I come here, it feels different. Not because they were told from the platform how to be, but because they've been taking classes and applying it in their lives. And when I would come in and people would truly engage with me, or I would notice all these people hugging, a little bit too much for me at that time. I would be like, oh, it's not a show. They're living from a deeper place of love. That's what makes us spiritually progressive. We are teaching and practicing these principles, this faith, this philosophy, and this way of life. And do you notice that when you see faith and philosophy and way of life, and you look at the overlaps, none of them can stand alone. And right there in the middle, maybe in some diagrams it might say SOM, science of mind. But when I look at it, I see myself right in the middle. Like you could just put the word life or the phrase my life is in the middle of how I combine my faith, my philosophy, and the way that I live. It's a way that I combine what I feel with what I think and what I do, how I actually show up. And my life is not spiritually progressive. My life is not working for me unless I have the intersection of all three. The same thing if you come from a background like I came from, a Christian background, then it's the Holy Spirit is the faith. The Father is the philosophy. It is the truth of it. It is the allness of it. And the Son is the way that I live my life, the way I execute it in my life, the way that I live. So the faith, the philosophy, and the way of life is no different. It's just that we explain it different than you may have heard the Trinity explained before. But we expect you to live it. And we expect each other to help others live it. And we integrate our mind, our body, and our soul. So faith, philosophy, and way of life, science of mind is not so airy-fairy, woo-woo, kind of like, ooh, that's kind of weirdy, culty stuff. Oh, come on, I know you've heard that before, or you've thought it. Right? It really is what Ernest Holmes said. Our lives will be different when we recognize the universal principles that are woven through all of the major religions and tie them together and stop judging or stop having that arrogance that my way is the best way, and instead integrate it all to create a life that works. Take a breath. So our book of the month is The Four Doors by Richard Paul Evans. It's a small book. It's a very fast read. And it is powerful. So when I began to think about we are spiritually progressive, and I was reading the book, I was like, what is in alignment with being spiritually progressive? And there are four doors in the book, hence the name, The Four Doors. But door number 3 is all about magnifying your life. And I do want to comment before I dive into that. Those of you who were in or who watched the Wednesday night meditation and metaphysics, the metaphysics part of the discussion, we got into a conversation about freedom is what our theme was. And there was some conversation about victimhood and about breaking through limitations. And if you haven't already purchased this book, you really want to purchase it because door number 1 is believe there's a reason you were born, which we did talk about. And there is a whole section about being clear about your mission and letting that direct you. But then in book 2, or door number 2, it's free yourself from limitation. And it is one of the best short reads about getting out of victimhood and being free, using free will to be free. But today we're going to talk about door 3, magnify your life. So in Magnify Your Life, there are several key points that he talks about. It's, yes, you have to dream, which might be in alignment with our practices of visioning and our practice of visualization. He has a great tip about asking, what if? What if? One of the examples he uses is his wife said, what if we packed up us and our 3 kids and went and lived in Italy for a year? And after all of the, but we can't really afford to do that, and what would we do? The kids need to go to school, and we don't know anybody in Italy, and all of the reasons why we can't do it, they kept saying, what if? Well, what if? Well, what if we could do it? Well, what if we could find a way that our children wouldn't get behind in school? Well, what if? What if? What if? And 9 months later, they were moving to Italy for a year. We can use that in our own lives to magnify our lives. So there's a really good piece in here about ask what if, take risks, because then once you ask what if and you start forward, you know what? If you're really stretching, moving into your vision, I'm gonna have to risk. I'm gonna have to leave something behind, let go of somebody, do something different. So taking risks, claim your place. And he tells a great story about when he was the author, the first book he put out, he was at a book expo, and like all of the important, up-and-coming authors who had these great books were in this one room, and they had a chair and a table, and everybody was going to sit. And he was like, well, next year or at some point, I want to be one of those authors. And as he was standing in the room, he noticed that there was one table that had an empty seat. And there were no boxes of books there. He went out to his car. He got a box of books. He came in the room with his box of books. As the gatekeepers, are there, and he's walking in with his books, and he was not supposed to be in there. He knew that, right? So the woman tries to stop him, like, well, who are you? And he says, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm late. And he just goes and he puts the table, and he pulls out his books, and the woman, and another staff person comes over to ask him something. But by now, people are coming to him because they don't know who a lot of these authors are. The expo is just saying these are the top authors that you need to get their books. And he starts signing books and say, oh, I hope you love the book. Claim your place, right? Take your seat. It's like God put that there for him, and he could have been like, well, nobody told me to take that seat, right? Do the work, because then once you are moving forward, you still have to do the work. Make a consistent effort, like we say, treat and move your feet, and work with passion, not work from fear. So that's everything that's in this chapter, right? And it's our way of being that allows us to magnify our life. We at CSLDallas are spiritually progressive, not so that we can be featured on some magazine cover. We do it so that you get the information you need and the inspiration you need in order to magnify your life. So one of the things that Richard Paul Evans says is to magnify our lives means to exchange our mental maps with much larger ones. Our mental maps are fine, And as we grow, we need to make that map larger. Now, for some of you, that kind of sounds like change your thinking, change your life, right? Exchange your mental map with a larger one. 3 keys to magnifying your life, all in alignment with what we teach you so that you can take these spiritually progressive lessons and apply them. So, exchange your mental map, your current one, for a much larger one. To magnify a life is to expand its influence and power beyond its current realm. If you want to magnify your life, then you have the opportunity to expand your influence and the power that is already within you beyond where you currently are. In other words, you cannot magnify your life standing, sitting, thinking, or being in the same place you are right now. In order to expand your life, in order to magnify your life, you have to grow beyond where you have come today. And to magnify our lives, or to magnify your life, it means to push and explore the limits of divine potential. Now, I had to actually think about this one quite a bit, because this idea of at first, when I read explore the limits of our divine potential. But in my head, I translated that to expand the limits of divine potential. And it caught me up because I was thinking, wait, divine potential is unlimited. It already exists as the potentiality of life, of love, of beauty, of harmony, of wholeness. And I had to go back and reread it. And I was like, oh, I'm going to explore for myself in my life the really non-existent limit of my own divine potential. And so in order to magnify my life, I've got to be willing to do that. I've got to be willing to assume and believe that I can be more. I can experience more. I can learn something more, because my potential is actually bigger than anything I can consciously understand. So when I explore my divine potential, I grow a little, I learn a little, and the circumference or my comfort zone gets bigger. But once that gets really comfortable, wow, if I want to magnify my life, I've got to explore the unlimited potential that Spirit has already created for me. So this is the reflection of us being a place that is spiritually progressive. It actually changes our lives. And there is a quote. This is a very long quote. There is a quote in Creative Mind that I love. The church of God is not built with hands. The church of God is eternal in the heavens. It is not lighted with candles. Its dome is heaven, and it is lighted by the stars of God's illumined thought. And each member in his or her separate star shall draw the things as he or she sees it, for the God of things as they are. The church of God is not built with hands. It is already existent and eternal in the heavens. What makes us spiritually progressive is because we understand that. And we understand that it is our choice to explore that, to create heaven on earth in our individual and our collective lives, and to align ourselves with a place like CSLDallas that gives us the information, the inspiration, and all the tools and resources we need to live spiritually progressive lives. Please join me in prayer. Beginning with the words of Ernest Holmes. When you can see in the saint and the sinner one and the same person, when you can realize that the one who kneels before the altar and the one who lies drunk in the street is the same one, when you can love the one as much as you do the other, no doubt you will be able to qualify as living in heaven. Alone in the desert, the forest, or by the restless ocean looking up by the stars, man breathes forth these words, with only my Maker and me. This is the truth of all of life. This is the truth of spirit that has created each one of us into a form, a body, a name, a person, from infinite potentiality. This is the truth of bringing divinity into the human experience. So I am grateful for understanding that science of mind is simply a faith, a philosophy, a way of life. It is simply a guidebook for me to learn how to live my best life. And the place that I learned to do that is CSLDallas, and for that I am so very grateful. I'm grateful for choosing to live a spiritually guided life. I'm grateful for having a place to navigate that journey and to have friends and practitioners and ministers and teachers, team members who helped me do that. And so I simply relax, knowing that this is a day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute journey, that I do not have to fear life as a human being, that it is all my path to God. So this week, let us go out together into the world, being radically inclusive, spiritually progressive, and transforming our lives and the lives of others. And so it is.
Thank you, Tracy Brown.